Hey folks, and welcome to a look at the earliest draft of Druid legendary powers coming in Shadowlands for Resto and Catweaving, and well, Owlweaving too. Now, I'm not on the beta, and numbers I doubt are perfect on these to sim out, but this is more looking at the idea of each legendary and how I think they might play out. So let's get started. So I'll be going off the order on Wowhead, link in the description. That means starting with the spec neutral ones in this video. These are the ones I am most excited for. As someone that enjoys Catweaving, they are designed for all specs, and so fit the theme of the hybridization that Druids are getting in Shadowlands, something that I am all for. Since Resto Druid is the spec that is most able to swap between roles and use affinities to their maximum, these all have strong aspects if we can use both sides. Starting with Runecarve 4, we have when Moonfire, Rake, Rip or Rejuvenation are on a single target, their effects are increased by 30%. To make best use of this, we're going to want to be Catweaving. 30% extra damage on 3 of our 4 dots is great, and since Sunfire cleaves naturally, we wouldn't want that one included anyway. Now, dots usually want to spread, but sometimes there is only one target. Add to that Rip's combo point requirement to keep up on multiple targets, it isn't really the easiest anyway. These effects should activate retroactively, so if one mob with Moonfire dies, the other Moonfire, if there's only one left, should get stronger. Rejuvenation is normally something that you want to spread as well, but if only your tank is taking damage, you could just use Wild Growth, Regrowth or Photosynthesis to keep up the rest. Overall, this isn't going to be active on all 4 abilities all the time, but it's whether you can make enough use of it to increase their output. Overall, and it looks interesting, and for single target, it's probably one of the best for Catweaving. Next up is Runecarve 3. Your damage over time effects deal their damage in 25% less time, and your healing over time effects occur in 15% less time. This is another one that will affect both our DPS and healing. Much more flexibility this time though. Dots make up most of our Catweaving damage, potentially less so for Owlweaving, but I'm not entirely sure, and HOTS obviously make up most of our healing. Now, 25% increased speed isn't just 25% extra damage, as casting a dot does take up a global cooldown, as well as energy for Rip and Rake obviously. It's still more flexible than Runecarve 4 though, and you may even find that since Rip will consume combo points quicker now, you might just end up using it all the time rather than Ferocious Bite, depending on how quickly the dot actually ticks down. For your HOTS, just like Haste, it's going to make it more powerful at a healing per second at the cost of more mana. Overall, this seems like a useful multi-purpose legendary, and it's probably the one that on paper I might craft first. Now on to Runecarve 1. Effects of Thick Hide, Astral Influence, Feline Swiftness and Lysaris Gift are increased by 75%. Those are the passive effects that you get. So Resto, you'll have Lysaris Gift by default, and then depending on whether you're Moonkin or Feral Affinity, you'll have the increased ranged or the increased movement speed. On top of that, we have when you shift into your affinity's form, you will gain Heart of the Wild for 10 seconds once every minute. Heart of the Wild being a cooldown that's in our CC tree now, that you can activate to increase the power of your chosen affinity, really letting you deal that much more damage as a cat or an owl. But for the passive side of things, we aren't really looking at much output gain. There's a bit of healing gain, obviously, from Lysaris Gift, and some minor speed or range, but it's not really what you're going for. What about the Heart of the Wild boost though, where every minute you can spend 10 seconds of it in a stronger Moonkin or cat form? One downside of this is it's not the most flexible. You'll want to spend all 10 seconds of that time doing damage to make the best use of it. The other downside is it really doesn't actually help your healing much outside the minor passive buffs. But the benefits will likely make this the strongest for raw damage in that window at least. For Feral, your non-Moonfire and Sunfire damage will be buffed by 30%, and combo point generators will be granted a bonus combo point. For balance, Star Surge will be instant cast and another 30% buff to damage, and this one will include Moonfire and Sunfire. Overall, strong for damage, but harder to use to its maximum, and it's one of the weakest for helping damage and healing. Lastly, for the spec neutrals, we have Lysaris Fleeting Glimpse, which I probably butchered. Every 45 seconds while in combat, cast a spell based on your form. That's Wild Growth if you're in caster form, Primal Wrath in cat form, and that deals a rip to AoE targets, Barkskin for bear form, Starfall, the AoE, for mountain form, and Stampeding Roar for travel form. One thing I didn't touch on the previous legendary, which this one also struggles with a bit, is a lack of control. The control you do get is making sure that you're in the best form every 45 seconds, but you'll want that situation to fit in at that time. So every 45 seconds without fail, you need to be in the correct form. All of the abilities outside the bear and travel are AoE based, so if you're on a single target fight, or a high damage fight, you aren't really going to be gaining much. When it's good, it's going to be really good. The issue I see is the lacking control over when it triggers, as opposed to others that are permanently active and will always be doing things when you need them to. I'll briefly go over the other viable ones for Catweaving and Owlweaving, and then for Resto. First up, the only one I could find that I think for both Feral and Owlweaving that would actually count would be Apex Predator's Carving. That's rip damage, has a 4% chance to make your next ferocious bite free and deal maximum damage. I see the neutral ones performing better because as Feral Affinity you do tend to deal more dot based damage, and those also help the healing, whereas this one is purely for damage. For Resto we have Memory of the Mother Tree. That's Wild Growth, has a 25% chance to cause your next Rejuvenation or Regrowth to apply to 2 additional allies within 20 yards of the target. Like all Resto ones, this one's not going to be great for damage, but if you need the healing AoE power in larger numbers like a raid, it seems stronger there, as opposed to a dungeon where covering everyone with Rejuvenation is relatively easy. Next up is the Dark Titan's Lesson. You may Life Bloom 2 targets at once, and Life Bloom's final healing is increased by 100%. My first thought here, great with photosynthesis, my go-to talent for dungeons, as you can really benefit from the Life Bloom on yourself and also on your tank. If your tank takes a lot of damage, this is going to be great. Again, likely something if healing is what your group struggles with, as opposed to you needing to do damage. Third for Resto is Druid Resto Runecarve 3. Swiftmen no longer consumes the heal over time on the target, and extends the duration of your heal over time effect on the target by 10 seconds. This makes Swiftmen easier to manage, as in Shadowland it will consume a hot off the target, and also allows you to spend better time dealing damage, as you'll be spending less time healing. A single global cooldown Swiftmen will extend all those dots, and you can just go back into cat form or moonkin form. Also likely to be a good choice for newcomers to the spec. I certainly see this one having a good showing generally, and I think for a lot of players this is going to be one that they'll go to and be pretty happy with. Lastly is Druid Resto Runecarve 4. Rejuvenation healing has a 2% chance to create a new Rejuvenation on a nearby target. This one I'm personally not a big fan of. I feel the first one covers a similar role. If you're not casting Wild Growth, I could see this one. This is purely and strictly a raid one really. It's not really great for saving you time as well to deal damage, since you'll just be spending all those global cooldowns casting Rejuvenation. Overall, I think there are a fair balance of legendaries, each one covering something else in terms of role or skill set. You have ones for single target, passive ones, AoE ones, and some more cooldown based ones. As a Catweaver, the spec neutrals excite me most, of course. As mentioned, I don't have beta access yet, but I am interested in seeing if Catweaving retains its dominance over Owlweaving. It did get a nerf in Shadowlands, but these legendaries do seem to favour the cat more than owl. The other thing is how these combine with the Covenant abilities, but again, that's something for beta. For now though, thanks for watching.